Welcome to Fearless with Jason Whitlock. I am Jason Whitlock. It's an honor to be here. Happy Tuesday to you and yours. Happy day after Monday. Happy day before Wednesday. Listen, when I say I have a jam-packed, action-packed, awesome show, I'm really talking about Tuesday, April the 12th. I had to check the date. Tuesday, April the 12th. We are jam-packed. Elijah Schaffer. You guys know him from Blaze TV. You guys know him from Slightly Offensive, and You Are Here. Elijah Schaffer is actually here in studio with me. We're going to get to him in just a few short seconds. Royce White is going to be on the show. Delano, Squires, my regular contributors. Jack Posobiec, he's going to be here and talking with us. Steve Kim, Shemeka Michelle, Uncle Jimmy. I'm going to umbrella all of our conversation under, what we talk about every day on this show: masculinity, male fearlessness, male leadership, men taking responsibility for this country and what's going wrong in this country. And that's why I'm starting with Elijah Schaffer, because I've never met Elijah until today, but I have followed his work. What Elijah does is some of the most courageous, masculine, needed, fearless journalism going on in America. He on the front lines at BLM and Antifa riots and protests at January the 6th, reporting things that the government does not want reported and said. This man embodies the fearless mantra, the fearless mentality. He promotes the kind of energy and exhibits the kind of energy that it's going to take to fix this country and bring it back to its natural, rightful order. Elijah Schaffer, thank you so much for stopping by.
Well, that's an honorable introduction from the legendary Jason Whitlock on, coincidentally, the Jason Whitlock show, The Fearless, right? This is such an amazing show, and I am so happy to be out here, man. I'm so excited because not only to meet you in person with your own incredible history, but honestly to hear your wisdom and to be on this show that I actually listen to and I learn a lot from. I just got to say thank you.
Well, thank you for being here, and I wish I had your youth because I'd love to be out on the front lines with you. But now I'm too old and too fat. I've always been a little fat, but now I'm too old, or I'm really not, because again,
32 isn't that old. You're doing all right. I was like, 32 is pretty good.
If I was in Ukraine, I would be eligible to be on the front lines of the war because I'm not 60. I think any man from 18 to 60, but. Elijah, just for my edification and the edification of this audience, walk me through a little bit of your background. Like, where did you come from? Why did you choose this particular path? Did you go to a journalism school and dream of being, some great journalist? Give me a little bit of the Elijah Schaffer backstory.
So I would say this is exactly opposite of anything that I thought that I would be doing in my life, which happens to be the case when you're a man and you end up hitting a glass ceiling in your life and you realize the only one keeping you from breaking through is yourself. I think LA is not even like a glass ceiling, it's a prison of pedophiles and girly men and some of the sickest and most perverted people out there, and corruption. And I grew up in the midst of it. I'm from LA, I'm an LA kid. I grew up right there in the heartland, and good weather, bad people, and extremely terrible traffic. But at the same time, it's a very diverse area, religiously, culturally, ethnically. And to be quite frank, I was a little bit of a scene kid. I was an emo. I had two-toned hair, nose piercings, spacers in my ear. Absolutely opposite of the person you're seeing here today, up until like maybe 3-4 years ago.
What happened?
Well, this is actually serious. I was agnostic, borderline atheist for most of my life. I found no meaning or purpose. I was a man of science. I was like Nacho Libre. I believe in science. And I just faced the world, went to school first in biomedical engineering and then in molecular biology, genetic engineering, which, by the way, I'm not autistic, but a lot of people in that field are. They're not very talkative, a lot of Asians. And if you see me now, I'm not exactly the guy to fit in. And, I studied, I worked hard. I worked in research in stem cell technology, worked in limb regeneration therapy, et cetera, performed a lot of surgeries on animals. And You know, it was interesting. And I was in grad school, and I ended up working side by side at the teaching credential, teaching science to high schoolers. And I was in this training program, and they sort of began selecting people in the groups based off of your oppression or oppressed group in LA. This is the first I had been exposed to this genuinely.
What year is this?
This is back in like 2017.
Got you.
So 2017, we're out there. And might I remind you, I'm standing there, and I had just had a professor who blacklisted me from the entire industry, which is why I went to pursue something differently. Because he told me my race was declining. He's part of La Raza. He came out, swinging, talking about how Trump people were Nazis. We remember 2017, very, very well 2016. And, he just decided, he told me he was going to block me from getting a job. So I forged my own way. I sat in a room in the corner by myself. They said straight white men to go in the corner, of course, being a California education program, I was the only one there. Everybody's got some special identifier. I condemned the group. I got on NPR. I brought up, before cultural Marxism was really being talked about on the mainstream, really condemned it on an LA radio station and came to debate somebody. It was so well received that I just decided from some suggestions from Ben Shapiro and some others who said, if you can start a show, if you can do something to get your voice out, we need more of you. And I just went out and said, you know what, I'm going to start a podcast. Everybody laughed at me. Everyone thought I was stupid. Why would some guy with a engineering degree in genetics and, creating unironically some of the same vaccine technology that we're using today and working in immunology and those types of things. What is he going to do to change right-wing politics? And that's really how I just jumped in, head first and created a podcast and a show to talk about my thoughts.
Wow. And so like you said, you're kind of different from the profile of people that were in your field because you seem very extroverted, talkative. You got a little comedic aspect to you as well.
Called retardation.
I definitely have that, and I definitely recognize that. And so was the success instantaneous? Did you immediately pick up an audience, or did you have to, because again, you have no skill. All you bring is passion, and you're a smart person, passion and intellect, but you no training in being a broadcaster, being a journalist of any kind. How did those things develop in terms of, no, I want to go where the action is?
Well, what happened was, starting a podcast, obviously in the studio, I lost everybody, man. I lost my friends. My church totally abandoned me on this one. My own mother, who's now deceased, she was very against everything I was doing. And it was really hard to go from being someone that people praised because you're going on a very safe and projected career path. You get to be the white coat. Before the pandemic, scientists, I would say, were a little more respected. Their expert meant something back then. So, and that's only a few years ago. And to use back then, things are changing so rapidly. It's true, back then, right? 2017, 2018. So to go from making your parents proud, people proud, kind of being in this prestigious, path forward, to say that you wanted a podcast when people don't really even know what podcasting was, sounds like foolishness. And I created my second episode, and the police showed up at my office to arrest me due to my threat to shoot up a local school. There was a local school, I'm not going to say where, in Los Angeles, that they had valid threats that I had called in, and someone said that I was going to kill high school students in a mass shooting. It was news to me because, the only thing high school students are killing themselves with is their own decisions today, right? TikTok and drugs and whatnot, and so I'm like, yeah, no, I'm not killing anyone. Well, it turned out that the podcast was so blunt, and I called it slightly offensive, that essentially people got wind of it. Leftist activists in LA got wind of it very quickly and called in a fake mass shooting threat to a local high school in my name. And I had to go to the police station and everything, and it was serious. It was actually serious. They had to go to the school, and I had to be put on temporary hold from filming. And I think that's what activated me to go, wait a second, we're barely getting a few hundred views on a show, and we're already getting targeted That was serious too. It was the first legal battle ever. And I was actually just looking at Facebook posts from 4 years ago, just a couple days, like April 8th, a couple years ago. It's almost the anniversary. It's about a few weeks ago. Me saying, hey guys, we've been completely shut down because of what was going on and people calling fake death threats, and here we are. And I knew with adversity, I go, okay, we have something. I'm like, we could go somewhere, but here's how God used it. I ended up getting shut out of my studio because it was considered a security threat. The police showed up. I ended up getting, barred. I couldn't film anywhere because of what was going on. So I was encouraged by a fellow friend of mine named Fleckas, who runs a channel called Fleckas Talks. We're good friends.
Essential Fleckas?
We're just Fleckas Talks. I don't know, maybe I think that's his show now.
Yeah.
But he
a big dude, like a former football player?
Yeah. Division I.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he's a homie. And he said, well, why don't you go out in the streets, take your podcast out on the road, and go interview people. Interviewed people. I'm gonna tell you, this is so funny. We think this is common now. I interviewed a girl at Whittier College where Nixon went, and she started explaining to me that she was trans non-binary, which doesn't make any sense. How do you transition if there's no binary? Like, I mean, you go from what? You're going from nothing to nothing, from dust to dust? I think you are. I think we know where you're headed. And that went viral. I don't know what happened. It just got, hundreds of thousands of views. Third show we ever made. God used the adversity of something, and I realized, I go, this is very, very, very exciting. This is exhilarating. And I watched as people were questioning, who knew? What is this? Trans non-binary? What's going on? And there was this fascination from the left, from the right, from the center, articles being written of like, what the hell's going on our college campuses? What's going on in our world? And that's what I bit the hook. And I went, there are not enough people just talking to people and trying to get real stories. Everyone's got a mission or a network or somebody telling them where to go, what to say, what to discover. And I'm like, the curiosity of a man doth have no end. And so I decided from that time on that my main priority was going to be just telling the stories that people weren't.
What you realize without a lot of background and knowledge is, for me, I graduated college in 1990, been doing this for a long time. Social media is one of the worst things to happen to journalism because everybody sits at a desk at home over their laptop and thinks they're engaging with real people and their real thoughts. And you figured out, no, let me actually go get face to face with people. Let me go to these events and actually cover it rather than rely on what someone DM'd me or what they tweeted out. And so, it's like, to make a drug analogy, you're getting the information straight off the boat, straight from the cotton fields or wherever they made the cocaine fields or whatever. You're getting it straight dope.
The crack gutters.
Yeah. And that is what has fascinated and impressed me about you. And so I want to ask, of all the different events you've covered, what has felt the most dangerous to you, or where you were a little like, man, should I be doing this?
I have been way in over my head. I've been running on a combination of the Holy Spirit, caffeine, and natural stupidity because I am not going to lie. I feel like all of America insane. I think we all didn't know what was going on the last few years. I think most of us still don't know. We're catching up. But I'll tell you this, I would rather be at the front lines not knowing what's going on so I can find out first than have to go through a daisy chain of people trying to find out what he said, what she said. And that gives me the perspective that I just go, you know what, I'm going to put myself wherever the story is. And I always had this phrase, you got to get shot to get the shot. And I don't mean with bullets, but definitely with rubber bullets. I mean, the amount of injuries that I've gone through, broken bones, and just, I've had a lot of surgeries, nerve damage, reconstructive surgeries, lung damage. It's been a very expensive battle and fight, very painful, a lot of things. I don't think there's any time that's been more dangerous than, for one, we rioted for like 100 days in Portland and besieged a federal building, and that being blinded and shot and leg broken and attacked and detained, that was a really intense time. But I'd say it would be a combination of two specific factors. Number one, real danger would probably be the night of Kenosha with Rittenhouse, only because not only was I next to him when he shot Rosenbaum, blew out his, I believe his spleen, his liver. So that was pretty crazy to witness, an eyewitness account. But also nobody talks about the amount of dozens of shell casings that were found in the area and the amount of drive-bys and shootings that occurred, where I'm just on the ground hearing bullets ricocheting. So you can see the light tracing on the FBI too of just the bullets flying. And when you're hearing hit cars, like a bullet hit a car above you, and you just go, I didn't sign up for this, I just wanted to make a podcast. I'm going back to the studio.
That is amazing that you're, and so clearly you've already referenced it several times. Your faith, a relationship with God is critical, a pursuit of the truth, obviously, which is attached to your love of God. But is that the only motivating factor? Because I'm wondering about love of country. And I ask that because I'm thinking of the UFC fighter, and his name is escaping me, but a month ago, see that? Colby Covington, he's from Arkansas, correct? Yeah. He talked about if something happens to his state, basically Arkansas, he would step up and defend it. And no one talked about this, but when he said that, it hit home to me because I'm so confused about what America is at this point and what direction we are, that when I heard the Covington kid say that, it's like, I think he's got the same confusion. It's like he knows what Arkansas is and he's willing to defend Arkansas. But I think it was almost intentional he left off the United States of America because I'm confused. Like, what are we? And so I'm wondering for you, is it just your faith in God, your pursuit of truth, or is it also this patriotic duty to try to save this country?
Well, I would say, according to a really amazing commentator he's the host of the show Heck Off Comedy, his name's John Doyle. He likes to say today that America is a theme park, and it's a little bit of just a giant explorative place and where people just choose what rides they want to go on. They're living for their own pleasure and over-consuming. And I have to say that, I agree with that analysis now, but I know that we were not always that. And people don't always see a very serious side of me. Because naturally I make light of pain with a little bit of humor. I think men do that. We'll literally, it's like that. You'll literally go out to the front lines and risk getting your head shot off rather than deal with the trauma in your life, Actually deal with the pain. I think we're going through a collective pain as a nation. And my family, we've been here since before the revolution. We're part of the sons and the daughters of the revolution. We've been here before we were a nation. I have family that fought on both sides of the Civil War for both the Confederate and of course the Union. I have family members who were scalped in Indiana by Sioux tribe and fought in different wars. We have a deep, deep history here. And my mom, may she rest in peace, she always instilled, I was homeschooled, she instilled with me such a fervor for this nation. She always told me, in this nation, God founded this place. And in this nation, God can rescue this place. He can redeem this. And even if the place can't finally be redeemed, at least the people can. And so, she would tell me that we've lost sight, that things have changed. And she reminds me how far we've come. She goes, you're her father. He's an engineer, an aeronautical engineer, helped design the B-2 bomber, actually stealth technology, excellent, very intelligent guy. And she was like, just to show you how quickly we've progressed. He remembers when they started using plastic in engineering. My grandpa, in his lifetime, for young people watching the show, it's in my grandpa's lifetime that engineers started working with plastic. So, we've really rapidly gone in both progress and also in the decline because with plastic, think about it, things have gotten cheaper, they've gotten faster, automated, etc. I got to tell you, Jason, I love this country. And when Donald Trump got up and he just said, look, there's a forgotten class of people. It is not the upper class. It is not the middle class. It is not the lower class, white or black. It is the people who built and made this country, that love this country. And they have been forgotten. They have been pushed back because we focus on what? Trans hormones in children and open immigration. I've been pissed off. And I call it the white rage. Maybe they call it white rage. Maybe it's just black rage. Depends what your skin color is. Or how you identify in the moment, but I have been so angry, and I didn't know what to do with that anger. I remember when I was in high school, I got banned from wearing political shirts. I wore a shirt with Obama and a communist flag. I couldn't wear it, right? But we could have trans liberation days, but I couldn't speak my views. I'd get shut down, detentions for speaking out. In college, I had teachers cry when I wore a Trump hat, during his, they cried, grown people crying, PhDs. The smoke screen was seen through, and I really was like, man, and this is a genuine heart of mine. I saw what was emerging with communist terrorists, with Antifa, and I saw there wasn't a lot of people that were covering it. And I saw that a lot of people weren't because they were scared, because there was a real and absolute threat of violence. These people were violent. They were, from the inauguration of Trump, they started rioting and breaking windows. And to an average person, you stay the hell away from things like that. It's like, don't talk to strangers as a kid. Stay out of trouble when you're an adult. Just mind your own business. I'm done minding my own business. All right, I'm done. And you know what? If it's their business and they live in my same country, it becomes mine too. And I realized, I go, these people need to be exposed. And I went out and I go, these are terrorists. This is before it was popular to say that. These are domestic terrorists. And I'm going to document carefully and methodically their acts of terrorism around the country. It's before I had funding from Blaze or anything. I go, I'm going to raise money. I'm going to travel. I'm going to infiltrate. And I'm going to show people in the world what the hell is going on in this country. Because the news is lying. The commentators aren't showing it. And there's nobody out there. And I got to say this. Since nobody else will do it, I'm going to go do it, and we'll see what happens. And boy, did I have no idea how much I would learn what it really means to form from a boy into a man during that time. I mean, I'm telling you, I already had a degree, moving in a good direction. I don't care what it is and what people say. For the last 4 years on the ground and confronting some of the most dangerous and radical situations in this country, I have transformed not just internally, spiritually, but also physically. Everything has changed about me.
One thing I don't want to put words in your mouth. And by the way, it's Bryce Mitchell is the UFC fighter I was thinking of, not Colby Covington. But that rage, I think, is your mother sounds like she instilled in you an incredible gratitude for the opportunities in this country and the people that sacrificed so that you could have this American freedom that everybody else in the world wants a piece of. And so that burns in me as well. And I think it burns in a lot of people that are regulars on this show, and it's part of the message we're trying to get across on this show is I've seen the left pervert the entire African-American journey. And the African-American journey in this country does not condemn America. It actually shows the best of America and is actually part of the reason why America became the envy of the entire world, because the things that Jefferson wrote in the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution being so biblically inspired, Black people made America live up to those ideas that, hold on, everybody's got to be free. And it brought out the best in America. And so I'm so enraged. It's a different kind of rage because I don't have your youthful energy, but I'm so enraged that people have so little gratitude for the incredible sacrifice that people made to make this country great. And for someone like me to come from the ghetto, to living in one of the, if not the richest zip code in all of America, when I lived out in LA and lived in Westwood, and just all the opportunities. My dad didn't graduate high school. My mother was a factory worker. It's that fire burns in me. And I just, sometimes I look at the world and I go, what are these people thinking? And it's why I left California, and that's why I brought up the Bryce Mitchell thing as it relates to Arkansas. I had to flee California because I was like, well, this is a communist, ungrateful, sexually perverted part of America that I just can't deal with anymore. And I love it here in Tennessee. I love my home state of Indiana. It's hard for me to predict what direction the rest of the country is going to go in. But I am committed to the fight and trying to explain to people the same things that are motivating you and the same things that, and I know this irritates some people, but I keep Trump supporters. I grew up around, they didn't know it, but they were basically Trump supporters. They're MAGA people, Black, factory workers, people that just wanted to mind their own business, do a manufacturing job, push their kids ahead. That's my whole upbringing. So when I heard Trump's inauguration speech, is when I was like, holy cow, this dude's talking about my family. He's talking about my mother and everybody that supported my dad's bar. And I'm looking at the media frame this dude as this out of control, racist, fascist, next Adolf Hitler. They're really framing me and my upbringing as some sort of evil upbringing here in America. And so I'm rambling a bit, but Elijah, I want you to stick around. I got some other people I want to bring into the show. I want you to chime in. I want to hear a bit more about your story, but I'm really honored that you took the time to come to Nashville and be on our show. And I just want to hold you up because, again, the conversation today on the show that we had planned that you fit in perfectly is I've been talking about Disney and what they're doing to the sports world and how they're feminizing the entire culture. And again, I just think you're such a shining example of what young men need to be, take responsibility for righting this country and for making people understand what a blessing it is to be born here. And I don't know how much you've traveled abroad, but I would imagine you've done.
Yeah, my wife's Australian.
Okay, yeah, and so I just wish people had the opportunity to see how the rest of the world lives and the freedoms that they don't even know exist, that we take for granted here in America. And you know, it's like we think we have poverty here. Whew, you go, you know. But anyway, I want to tell you guys about my friends at Bullion Max. As inflation surpasses highs not seen in 40 years, the value of the dollar is decreasing with every passing day. You're paying more at the pump, the grocery store, for cars, for housing. Face it, your paper money is not worth what it used to be. It's worth a lot less. Friends, the timing couldn't be any better for my new sponsor, Bullion Max. Bullion Max is a direct-to-consumer precious metals retailer that can help you diversify into gold and silver. It's a hedge against inflation. It's also security for your family in times of crisis. And here's why I love Bullion Max. They're owned by veterans in the precious metal space, offer some of the lowest prices on the internet, and they make it so easy to buy directly from their website. I want to help you get started, so I worked out a special offer with them just for you. Get Bullion Max's Silver Starter Kit at employee pricing. Just go to bullionmax.com/Jason. This kit includes 5 of the most desirable silver products, including a silver American Eagle and a silver Australian Kangaroo. This offer is limited to just 1 per household, so get yours right now. Go to bullionmax.com/Jason now. This is not something I'm recommending. This is something I've done myself. I've used Bullion Max and will continue to use it as I try to diversify and inflation-proof the wealth that I've acquired. We all need to be looking at alternative routes to secure ourselves and to secure our family's future. Bullion Max is a great way to go. All right, Royce White, next. All right, welcome back. Elijah, you're in for a treat. Royce White is the smartest athlete I've ever met. He's one of the smartest people I've met. Royce was a first-round NBA draft pick, wound up not playing in the NBA, but he's now actually running for the congressional seat of Ilhan Omar, and he regular contributor on this show. Royce, welcome back to the show. Royce is here because yesterday I did hour and 20 minutes straight of just me talking about Disney and the feminization of America and how they're using the sports world and ESPN to overtake the sports world and impose this emasculated culture on all of America. And so I wanted to bring Royce in to get his reaction to my hour and 20 mono yesterday. Royce, welcome back. And what are your thoughts? Am I wrong for saying that Disney's trying to impose a magic queendom instead of a kingdom, they're trying to impose a magic queendom on America?
Yeah, no, not at all. I think you're spot on, and I've spoken before about this neoliberal agenda, this Marxist agenda, and the overall implications for our American culture. I did think that it was ironic, and I wanted to share with you that the hat that was mentioned that Joy was wearing is actually comes from a company that was founded here in the Twin Cities by a childhood friend of mine. And I called him last night after watching the show, and I kind of we sort of talked through this, and I explained to him how this war of words was being waged, and how his hat ended up in this segment. So his company is actually Hybrid Nation. In Diversity We Trust is a subset collection within his overall brand. But he's a young man that, he's a young entrepreneur. Owns an apparel company, built it up from nothing. He's traveled all around the world to try and build that company into something successful. And he's still grinding away at that. And I think what we're seeing, or what's implied by that, is a young man who definitely doesn't agree with this sort of authoritarian, tyrannical, ideological war that's being waged by the neoliberal movement is still subject to try and market or try and appeal to the broadest audience possible in a commercial aspect. And there's huge moral implications to that. And I think he still has to sort that out. But in his defense, the LGBTQ community here at home in the Twin Cities has gone after me a number of times for speaking my mind on these issues. And he's backed me every single time in personal relationships. From people who were upset with him, who said, you can't associate with Royce anymore. We're canceling him. We're censoring him because he's not sensitive to the LGBTQ topic. And he's actually supported me continuously and defended me publicly. So, this is the height of the linguistic war that's going on in our society. And I think by and large, look, diversity is not a bad thing, right? What is a problem is when you try and use diversity as an idea to replace the Godhead, right? To replace faith in God, and also to make it a default that is a net positive, in terms of skin color or appearance. I mean, I think those things are not only completely inappropriate and illogical, they're being intentionally done and waged as a linguistical war.
Elijah, I don't know if you can follow that completely, but yesterday I talked about there's a Fox Sports broadcaster, Joy Taylor, woman in the sports lane. She's wearing this hat that says, "In diversity we trust." And, she's obviously replaced diversity, inclusion, and equity is their religion. That's replaced God and any kind of religious faith. That's fascinating that Royce's friend is actually someone from Minneapolis. Yeah, it's a small world, but I'm someone that believes in diversity, but only after qualifications have been met, competence has been met, that the ability to do your job has been met, competition. After all those things are satisfied, then I'll be, okay, you want to tip your hat to diversity and all that? Because I think I look at it like what's going on in professional sports. If you open up the competition to everybody and just let the best people, let a meritocracy take place, you're going to get some diversity. But if you start bending the rules and start creating different standards for different people, you may end up with some diversity, but it won't be able to get the job done. And so that ends up undermining the country, and, it ends up creating bitterness and division rather than creating a melting pot that works for everybody.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen that with the cackling Kamala and with Ilhan Omar. I mean, Royce, if you didn't allegedly marry one of your siblings, then you're already doing better in my book than some of the people that you're up against. But But I think the diversity is a huge confusion overall, because diversity actually can be confusion with the Tower of Babel, right? You look at this idea that sometimes diversity is actually bad, because if you are trying to, build or do a project and you have people who don't understand the project, you won't complete it. If you're trying to have the best basketball team, and you bring, Leah Thomas, maybe you'll do well on the basketball court. But you bring another woman, a swimmer on, you're not going to be the best basketball team. And so as a country, we only want diversity, like you said, for meritocracy, so that we can actually find out who's the best, who's the qualified. How can we come together on a unified level so that we can actually build this great country? But today, man, to say diversity we trust, to me, is so anti-theologically correct, because in God there's neither Jew nor Greek. He even says that, there's slave nor free, that we're all one in Christ. And so to think that God is not the head of diversity, that God is not the head of all things that he created, that we would replace God with worshiping the creation rather than the creator, no wonder why we're all screwed up.
Royce, I'll let you have the last word on this.
Yeah, well, I've said it before. I think there's a huge God-sized hole that man has tried to fill with ideology and material possessions, and it'll never work. It'll never suffice. I think that the idea that diversity is by default a net positive is completely illogical. But there is also the flip side of the coin, where there are certain aspects of our society that have become intentionally non-diverse. And I don't mean around skin color or identity or sexual orientation. I would say the diversity of thought. And what we're actually seeing is the neoliberal movement and establishment try and cancel or nullify the diversity of thought. So even in their own disposition or holding up of diversity, we see that it's selective and it's arbitrary. And I know we don't have time to get into that nuance today. Hopefully we will in the future. But this is the weapon of words, the war of weaponizing words, right? They actually claim diversity is the linchpin of their movement, yet they want no diversity of thought.
Royce, I've never asked you this, and this will be my final question. For me personally, because I think I fit the stereotype of the dumb jock all the way through college. I graduated Ball State with a 2.2 grade point average. I majored in football, and probably my real major was socializing, drinking beer, smoking a little weed. And I literally think, and I wonder if this is true for you, had I been a better athlete, had I had a professional career of any sort, I don't think I would have intellectually evolved as much as I have. And I wonder if that holds true for you. If you had had, a 10-year NBA career and made hundreds of millions of dollars, do you think you would be the same person you are today?
I think I've been blessed with the way that my journey unfolded. It was just as God wanted it to be. I was fortunate enough to feel and hear God's calling in throughout my journey. And, the growth of one's intellect is something that only comes by way of commitment, discipline, and the rigorousness of thought. There is no other way. Nobody is born an intellectual genius. That's just not how it works. So I would say there's a lot of truth to that had I been inundated with an 82-game schedule, right? Nonstop practice and travel and the real rigors that do come with being a professional athlete at the highest level, especially in the NBA. There's a good chance that my worldview may not have developed and matured at the rate that it has, but there's also the chance that if I had doubled down on my commitment to faith and God, that his grace would have allowed me to have that growth with a basketball career. What I think is that the material high, the material obsession that has come to grow right next to professional athletes has blocked them from the vision and the sight of truth and faith in God.
Good stuff, Royce. I got to keep it moving. Thank you. Great job. Let me tell you about our new friends at Preborn. Throughout the whole world, the leading cause of death is abortion. In the United States, murder has become a wholesale business since Roe v. Wade. We've killed over 68 million children. Nearly 25% of pregnant mothers do not choose life. The Ministry of Preborn and Blaze Media are partnering to help rescue 50,000 babies from abortion in 2022. Preborn is the direct competition to Planned Parenthood and the largest provider of free ultrasounds in the United States. When you let a woman see her baby on an ultrasound and hear the heartbeat, she is 80% more likely to choose life for her baby. And when the mother chooses life, Preborn provides maternity and baby clothes, diapers, car seats, counseling, and much more free of charge. Preborn has a passion to save unborn babies from abortion and see women choose Christ. Over the past 15 years, preborn centers have saved 188,000 babies. Will you help rescue babies' lives? To donate, dial pound 250 and say keyword baby. That's pound 250, keyword baby, or go to preborn.com/fearless. All right. Delano Squires, X. All right, welcome back. Listen, I used to call this guy the smartest man on the show, and everybody started complaining. Jimmy, Shemeka, Royce, Dave Shannon, everybody started complaining. And so I try not to call Delano the smartest man on the show anymore, even though he's, I almost said it, but I'm not. He's
Handsomest? Sharpest?
Those titles go to me, actually. But anyway, I'm trying to come up with a new way to say that this dude is smarter than me and smarter than virtually everybody else that comes on the show. Delano Squires, welcome back to the show. And he has another example of why I hold him in such high regard. He's written a column today that, okay, if the left is offended by the word groomers, Delano wants to call them tenderizers. That they're tenderizing young people, and not just young people, but adults, parents, everybody. Yeah. And you talked about the marination process. You can pound them. Anyway, Delano, explain your column. I thought it was brilliant. I thought it was clever. It put a smile on my face while making a profound point.
Sure. So Jason, as you said, a lot of the controversy around the whole grooming issue has been less about the behavior that people are trying to describe and more about the use of the term. And we're seeing that obviously on the left, they're saying, oh, Republicans and conservatives talking about grooming are engaged in a moral panic. But even some conservatives, right? I mentioned in the piece Andrew McCarthy and David French, who took conservative Senate Republicans to task for asking now Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson about her record of, being lenient towards child sex offenders. So a lot of it has been about the language, and we talk about this all the time. The left's first fight is for the dictionary, so they want to control the terms of debate. So I said, okay, if you don't like groomer, we can use a term that I've been using for a little while, which is you're tenderizing, right? And I use the imagery of someone cooking meat, right? We love good ranches around here, so if you get your steaks and they're still a little bit cold, sometimes you put them out the room temp, you let them sit down, but some people will use one of three main methods. Pounding, so that's with a meat mallet. Braising, so that it's cooking at a relatively low temperature. Think of what you would do in a pot roast in a crock pot. And then marinating, which everybody's familiar with, right? You put your meat in the juices, the mango, the pineapple. It smells good, it's fragrant, but each of those has an analog in culture. So my argument is that pounding is really about using the force of law and public policy to force people into accepting ideas that they otherwise wouldn't. So when the Biden administration threatens the state of Alabama or other states who won't let doctors prescribe gender hormones to kids or do mutilations, right, of healthy breast tissue or sex organs, that's pounding. When Jack Phillips from Masterpiece Cake Shop gets taken to court over and over again on nonsense, trumped up charges and ends up before the Supreme Court, who decides in his favor, by the way. That's pounding. That's people trying to use the force of law to make this man submit to their will and their worldview. So next is braising. And again, I mentioned the crock pot. So braising is about cooking a meat, a tough cut, low and slow, using moisture. So this is really is not grilling, right? So you don't turn the flame up too hot. You don't pound it. But when I talk about braising, I talked about how we have all been sort of forced over time to accept the notion of, sex being something that's assigned at birth by a doctor, a totally foreign concept to anyone before basically the last 5 years, or the use of personal pronouns in people's bios or in their email signatures. These are all changes that have taken a fair amount of time to implement, but they have been solidified through constant instruction and people saying, well, I'm sorry, you misgendered me. My pronouns are they, them. And you say, okay. So then you sort of consent to it over time. And then the last one is marinating, which I think this lies at the heart of the pushback to Disney and the parental rights bill in Florida, which was obviously known as Don't Say Gay. It's the use of culture and media and music to introduce certain concepts particularly to children at a very, very young age, and doing it in a way that makes it appealing to them. So as I said, typically when you marinate, you marinate a cut of meat in something that's fragrant. So you smell the aroma. So you figure it can't be bad because it smells good. In the same way, I mentioned in the piece how Nickelodeon uses a show that's geared towards toddlers called Blue's Clues to introduce kids to trans moms and disabled non-binary dads. And again, there are other examples of that in the media where you see, the executive producer from Disney bragging that she was trying to introduce queerness wherever she could in Disney characters. And she sort of said tongue-in-cheek that she had a not-so-secret gay agenda. But these things are happening every single day. I also mentioned Desmond is amazing, who's at the time an 11-year-old drag kid, right? If you can wrap your mind around that concept, who didn't appear on the back pages of The Blade or some other LGBT magazine. He was on Good Morning America, and he was introduced as an inspiration to young children. That's marinating in action, right? You use the sort of cultural enzymes to pull the fibers apart. And really, when I talk about breaking the meat down or breaking people down, it's to tear apart that connective tissue, being the truth of God's word, the importance of the nuclear family, and parental authority in all things having to do with their children. But again, Jason, what I tried to make clear in the piece is that this is not just about kids, because I mentioned the actor Malik Yoba, which anybody in my age group would know from New York Undercover, 90s, mid-90s cop drama that ran on Fox, sort of the epitome of urban black masculinity at that time, who goes on the Breakfast Club and allows himself to be re-educated by 3 LGBTQ activists, because Malik Yoba made the mistake of calling women naturally born, quote unquote. And they stopped him mid-sentence and they said, oh no, there's nothing natural about it. And they made him repeat the lines, the sex assigned female at birth, and for whom their gender identity conforms with how they feel, or whatever nonsense they were talking about. But he said those words dutifully. So in real time, you got to see this archetype, again, of black masculinity go from hero cop to transgender puppet and parrot in a matter of 1 minute. So I just wanted to paint that picture and give people on the right or the sane left another term that they could use and put in their back pocket.
Speaking of tenderizing and grooming, that's when I think of LA, and that's what I think of. And when I think of Hollywood and just everything they push, and what eventually just like pushed me out of LA, there's a belief system that you have to buy into, or you can't work in Hollywood, you can't work in LA. Was that your experience as well, being a native Southern California?
Jason, I was groomed as a kid myself, like genuinely, and I didn't realize that was going on until I got older.
By whom?
Well, I'll tell you this. I mean, it's kind of shocking. I don't want to go into too many details, but like I thought, when I was like 13 years old or whatnot, that there was these adults who were suddenly like, that's how I got into drugs, were giving me ecstasy and whatnot, and were like inviting me to clubs, and I was sneaking out of my house, giving me cocaine, different things. I thought I was cool. I didn't know what was going on fully. They made me watch them have sex, different things like that in this weird house that had like blue lights on the inside. Thought it was a little bit weird, but I was young. And it wasn't until, I'm not gonna say who it is, but a close friend of mine ended up being offered by a guy that we hung out with that he would get us as many girls as we wanted, but we'd have to perform oral sex on the guys, and we weren't cool with that. I mean, I guess it's cool now, but back then you weren't trying to be gay or anything in junior high or high school. And so there was a genuine like trade-off of like they're bringing you in, and I don't want to go into too many details, but I mean, like, I thought that was more like normal because I was like getting access to clubs and getting kind of brought around as a teenager. But I look back and I'm like, oh wow, that was a sex grooming group. And those people, and I would ask people, like, as I grew up, I'm like, did you go through that? And you know what, the amount of people that were molested, I'm gonna tell you, this is so shocking. I led a youth group, and we had an all guys group, and I just was like, I would sort of talk to the guys and see their past. There was more guys in the youth group that had been sexually abused as children in LA than were not abused.
I try to explain this to people about Los Angeles, and they always think I'm bluffing or exaggerating, and I'm just like, no, that's the price of admission out there. And I think everybody has this fantasy, oh, I want to be famous, oh, I want to be a superstar on TV or in a movie, and when you try to say, man, there's a price to pay, and that casting couch is no joke, and just they've come to this belief that there's this taking a child and introducing them to sex and all kinds of perverted sex, that there's something positive out of it. And so, I don't want to get us in too much trouble, but I always say what I believe. I believe a lot of things going on in this society are related to a sex cult. I'm just sorry, and they can call me QAnon or Whitlock Anon, a conspiracy theorist or whatever, but there is a sex cult, and it's been normalized, and experiences like yours happen to kids at 12, 13, 14, 15 years old, and then they revisit that trauma on the next generation of kids.
Yeah, and I'm just gonna say, I didn't end up going through with anything, because luckily back then, that's what I was gonna say. I think their number one issue is that obviously the problem is that teenagers didn't want to be gay or don't want to do gay stuff. So what's the barrier to the sex cult? Well, let's normalize gay stuff. And if we can normalize gay stuff, we normalize transgender and queer and all these things. The last horizon is to blur the lines between consent and, of course, the age of consent. And so that's their last, because that's what stopped me and my friends. And so I think they probably seen a pattern. Hey, all these young people, they don't want to be made fun of for this, so let's normalize it, and then let's change the standards, and then we can get what we want. It's sick.
Delano, I'm going to give you the last word, but Elijah, we love to say on this show, LGBTQIA, and the P is silent.
Ooh.
Pedophilia is silent. Delano, I'll give you the final word.
Yeah, just hearing Elijah say that was powerful. And I think really what we have here, we talk about this all the time, Jason, that we're engaged in a cosmic battle for truth. And this is something, particularly for Christians, that we're not unfamiliar with. It starts in the book of Genesis, and when the serpent approaches Eve, he's been running the same play ever since, right? Did God really say? So trying to introduce doubt into the minds of the hearer, and then trying to deny the consequences of sin. All right. Oh no, God is not going to. You won't surely die, and then going on to say that what God said is evil and should not be touched is actually going to be for your good. He said, no, God wants you to eat of this fruit. So, so much of what we're chasing, again, has played out already throughout time. But I want people to understand how it works. God gave Adam and Eve, right, the tree of life. They reached for the tree of knowledge of good and evil. They ended up getting neither. We're headed down the same path. We think what we're doing is going to lead to an abundant life, and that we have acquired all different types of knowledge, particularly in the sciences, and we're getting neither. Because the things that we're pushing are neither scientific. Anybody can go check the clips on what Bill Nye said about sex and gender in the 90s and compare it to what he says in the 2000s. So the things that we think are our pursuits of knowledge are only leading to death and destruction. And that's why, and we've said this before on the show, we're going to, you push forward 10, 15 years, there's going to be a generation of kids who look back on adults today and say, why didn't you do anything to stop me and stop them? Because those kids are not going to be able to reproduce. They're going to be miserable. Many of them are going to kill themselves and spend a lifetime on antidepressants. And we are allowing a very small but influential group of people to tell us that letting kids do that today is the epitome of love. And I think we should reject it.
Thank you, Delano. Reminds me, we'll get into
Jason.
this later in the week. I was just reading a story in the Atlantic about how kids are far more depressed than they used to be. And the Atlantic, of course, listed 4 factors and somehow avoided that the decline in religious faith has nothing to do, isn't connected to the depression young people are. And so they always overlook God, but you can't tell me the depression that kids are experiencing, the pervasive depression, isn't connected to the fact that our society becomes more and more secular. All right, Jack Posobiec. Did I say that right? Posobiec? Posobiec.
Call him Poso, King Poso.
Posobiec. X. All right, welcome back. We're going to bring in Jack Posobiec, senior editor at Human Events, host over at, did I screw that up again?
King Poso. Call him King Poso.
Posobiec. No?
Well, Posobiec?
Posobiec. Oh, I'm sorry, Jack Posobiec. I love Jack. Jack P is what I'm going to call him. Senior editor at Human Events, host over at Turning Point USA. Jack, I've recruited a friend to help me interview you because, you know, if you get us in trouble by saying something about Disney being groomers or whatever, I'm going to blame it on Elijah and have you two
Elijah
go after
said
him and
far,
not me.
far worse about Disney than you or I ever have.
So
And I
what
don't just mean
what
on
happened?
Air. I think what he says on air is bad. Oof, you should hear him off the mic.
So what did you say so bad about Disney, and why did Twitter suspend you, and are you off suspension now?
So we're off suspension now, temporarily locked out, and it was a situation where we had a T-shirt up that was through this T-shirt company that does, you know, parody shirts and stuff. So they put up the logo, you know, the famous Disney logo of the Magic Kingdom, and then they wrote boycott groomers on that. I wake up and I say, hey, this is a, you know, funny T-shirt, post it up, gets a lot of retweets, you know, people are talking about it. Goes a couple of days and it sits up there. Nobody has any problem with it. Then Palm Sunday morning, you know, I wake up, we're about to, you know, get the kids ready for church. And I see, oh, you've been locked out of Twitter for 12 hours because of hateful content that may have been harassing towards, and you know the whole list, sexual orientation, gender identity. And I'm looking at it saying, I didn't know that groomers is a gender identity now. That's a new one to me.
So we've been having a discussion on this show since Friday. I've circled back to it on Monday and even today's show. Like, this Disney sexual thing isn't a joke, in my view. I think they are feminizing our culture. I think they are grooming young kids. I think they are trying to supplant parents as the primary guardians, groomers of young people's identity. I think Disney's right at the heart of that. Do you agree?
Well, I will agree on this point, because one thing that we did over at Human Events just a week before the suspension that I think had us in Disney's crosshairs was that we leaked the internal messages from the cast member forums at Disney World. Now, cast member, that's what they call their employees. So we leaked the internal forums. And what were these people saying on there? The actual employees of Disney? They were saying two things. Number one, that they didn't think that the company should be involved in politics because they thought that that's something where, why turn away half of your audience? And then number two, a lot of them, even some people who said that they were themselves gay, actually supported DeSantis's bill and said, why should a company or a teacher, someone who's not a member of the family, be involved in any of these discussions with kids at that age? That's something that should be in the realm and the purview of the parents themselves. And so many other people just saying things like, look, we're just trying to work at the park. We want to have a nice amusement park for kids to come and have a good time with mom and dad and provide that, world-class experience for them, take some pictures with the fireworks and that kind of thing. Not interested in, telling Timmy that he's going to be a Jenny now and all this kind of stuff that's going on. And so when I look at that, and I remember that one of Elon Musk's statements about his criticisms of Twitter as a platform was that Twitter increasingly was doing the bidding of their largest corporate advertisers. Well, who's one of the largest corporate advertisers in media in the entire world? It's none other, of course, than Disney. So when you add all this up, it really seems like Disney is using their corporate and financial heft to come down on the side, basically, of the people who want to support this type of behavior in schools. And to go to your next point that you were actually making, number one, we've seen numerous Disney employees at these parks and many other times be arrested for themselves dealing with child pornography or child molestation. We've also seen, and this is where DeSantis was targeting it, so many teachers across the country, public schools and private schools, a complete nationwide epidemic. Every single day, you could just go onto the Twitter machine, go into the search bar and type it in, teacher arrested, and you can find it state after state after state where this is going on. And it's kind of like when they asked, the bank robber Willie Sutton back in the day, said, why do you rob banks? He said, that's where the money is. So why are so many pedophiles ending up in teaching positions? There you go.
So I read this somewhere this week, and I don't know if I read it from a story or if it was someone's tweet, and maybe it's even inappropriate for me to ask this question, but I'm going to ask it. It's a fearless show. Do we think there's a higher percentage of gay employees within Disney than perhaps other companies? I thought I read somewhere where someone said 40% of Disney employees identify as gay or LGBT. And I'm not sure, because how would you know that? Is that on some question?
If you live there, this might be anecdotal, but I can tell you, almost every queer or gay person I knew ended up working at Disney personally in the area. And I do know they had programs. I was part of this thing called Cat at Castle in high school, which was not a queer program, but there was a lot of queer people in it. It was a associated student body program. And I do know that Disney would outreach for internships and things, specifically looking for gay students. They'd have Gay Day, where they would have the park just celebrate before it was even socially acceptable. And they would really promote employees to wear rainbow pins, et cetera. This was many, many years ago, over a decade ago. So they've done intentional outreach. And perhaps I would just say that this lack of maturity, this infantile perspective, when you go there, a lot of these people don't want to grow up. They don't want to face reality. They don't want to be the people who God made them to be, and they don't want to understand that we are sinners and we are fallen. And so, live in a magical kingdom and live a make-believe life.
That's an interesting point, because Disney World is about not growing up and rediscovering your childhood. Or it's going to Disney World as like a 6 or 7 year old is one of the greatest experiences of my life. And I still remember it. It's the only time I've been to Disney World. But that's an interesting, that the culture of Disney is a youthful culture, is a culture about escaping reality. Go ahead, Jack. Did you have something you wanted to add?
Yeah, it did, because so when I was out actually in Orange County doing a speaking engagement there in 2019, that we had our first son born, and we said, oh, look, we're right here. We're right down from Disneyland. It's about 3 years ago. And we said, let's go. Let's just take him for the day. We kind of had an empty hole in our schedule. We said, let's take him over to Disney for the day. And we took him, and he had a great time. But I noticed that there were a lot of people at the park while we were there who, they weren't there with their kids. They weren't there with families or anything like that. And it had just become this new thing to go to. And I also noticed, by the way, the Star Wars Land, I guess they call it Galaxy's Edge exhibit over at Disney, that seemed to attract a different type of element rather than the rest of the park. The rest of the park is very family friendly. This attracted people, all wearing black, all talking about what's the latest lightsaber they want to get, and just a little bit didn't fit in with the rest of the park. And you would see them when they were going around to other areas of the park, these sort of like very, Elijah sure knows about, your gamma males and omega males on that whole hierarchy. And these guys just totally did not fit in with the rest of the park. And I was looking at it saying, man, what exactly is the Star Wars universe at this point appealing to? And Disney, of course, is a big part of taking that turn in Star Wars. And so it's actually been something where I said, look, you know what, I'm done with it. So we've actually decided at this point as a family that we're going to raise our kids completely Star Wars free. We're letting them watch the old Disney movies and stuff like that, but no Star Wars whatsoever.
Elijah mentioned that he was homeschooled. Jack, you're a parent. Do you plan on homeschooling your kids?
It's either going to be homeschooling or, we're looking into some of these independent schools that have a classical education. We're Catholic, and so there's some academies that now do, it's sort of a hybrid independent Catholic education, but combined with a classic education. So, learning Greek and Latin, learning to say, they already pray in Latin, but being able to do that at a young age, and of course having a great books compendium. So I think people really are trying to break the mold when it comes to education, and we're definitely not sending them to public school. That's for sure.
Look, I'm much older than both you guys. I'm 54. I'm telling you, other than we had a high school basketball coach that was very successful, Mrs. Parrish is her name. She was gay. But that's the only teacher I can think of that I knew their sexuality. I don't think I know I never talked with her about it, or, kids may have made little passing comments, but it wasn't a focus of attention. And I never really thought about the sexuality other than Mrs. Schwinn, because she was our teacher. She was really hot.
We all had that one. You didn't go through puberty yet. Sometimes you were younger. You're like, why do I like this teacher?
It's hot for Mrs. Schwinn.
But I'm just wondering, is there something about the teaching profession now that is attracting more LGBT than anything else? It has something, when you guys were in school, were there more LGBT teachers than perhaps my day?
Well, I just want to say, this is totally an unproven theory of mine, but it's something I've observed. Is, on one hand, Posobiec's totally right, which he is often very much right about, go where the money's at. And if you're a pedophile, you're going to go where your prize is. And unfortunately, that is our schools, and it's a very degraded profession now, so it's not so hard to get there. But on top of that, I've seen this connected to the Disney thing with teachers, is that Disney knows, and you talk to people, Disney adults, I feel like have had a lot of trauma as a kid, probably sexual trauma or absent parents. And because it's really sad in a culture if what you grow up remembering from all of your childhood and being raised is Disney movies. And there's a lot of people in our country that are like this. The reason why you might do that as a young kid is you've got nothing else to remember. You don't have your family meals, you don't have a good childhood. And so you hold on to something that at least will cause you to escape, almost like someone would cope with alcohol when they're older, or drugs, or sex. You're gonna cope with what you have access to. And obviously parents will raise their kids on that entertainment. And so sometimes, with everything being bad, and that being the only good thing, you allow yourself to revisit that by holding on to the one good thing that you know into your adulthood, which is a Disney adult. And I think with kids too, with teachers, is a similar thing, is that when they were younger, they were abused, they were misunderstood, and they were probably victims of a lot of abuse, absent parenting, etc., broken system. And they want to come in and say, you know what, I felt odd one out, but I want to let you know, not only this is normal, but let's normalize this as a coping mechanism when they get older for the trauma that they've experienced and the abuse they've been at the hand of. Unfortunately, sometimes the victims become the attackers and the aggressors if you don't deal with it through God, if you don't try to understand, bring reconciliation, redemption. And what we're seeing is, rather than people saying, hey, I grew up traumatically and I have problems because of that, and I want people to feel better, to find healing, because we remove God and there's no healing, they say, well, let's just normalize the trauma by passing it down intentionally so that it's no longer trauma, but it's the status quo. And that's the heartbreaking part about it.
That's a powerful comment. Jack, I'm going to give you the final say on this, and I'm going to let you go. But I want to add this before I let you go. I was just, as Elijah was talking, I was thinking about what's happened in the last 30 years to the American family and how there's less nuclear families and there's more two working parent families. And so there's less supervision of kids. Kids are more vulnerable inside their schools than in any time in the history of America. There's not two involved parents, one that's on the PTA or making sure they're at all the parent-teacher. There's basically unsupervised kids. There's kids being raised by grandparents or single parents or parents that are just too distracted. And so, yeah, I could see how schools are more vulnerable now because kids are more vulnerable now. But Jack, I'll give you the final say, and thanks for joining us.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate it, Jason. And Elijah, you're exactly right. They say hurt people. And I think, if we tie everything together, it's the complete loss of moral standards in our country. So we don't have moral standards for teachers. That used to be you had to have the highest morality because you were one of the most respected people in the community was a teacher. And teachers dressed modestly. Teachers had authority. Teachers even had authority over parents. And you'd go watch like an old, go watch Christmas Story. You can see that with a teacher. She has authority there. We don't have those moral standards anymore. And it's because we took away the sole source of morality in this country. And that was God. That was the Bible. That was the central focus. That's the same reason that our government system doesn't work anymore and all these other systems, because if you take away God, you end up having this, choose your own morality, and that someone can say up there when they're running, or not running, but they're nominated for, Supreme Court justice and say, well, I think the pedophile is actually the victim because he just clicked the link and now he's supposed to lose 50 years of his life. No, I think the victims are the people that are victimized and re-victimized every time. But of course, because we don't have traditional morality anymore, we have this inverted morality of an oppressor class versus an oppressed class, which is totally made up by people like Karl Marx and the critical race theorists and critical theorists in general. And that's why we have this now choose your own morality. And it's exactly what Elijah said. It's I'm messed up. I've got trauma. So I'm going to pass that trauma on, and I'm going to declare this to be the status quo now. And we're going to destroy. This is why, by the way, you hear people saying like, oh, we need to take down Western civilization to destroy fat phobia because fat phobia is created by Western institutions, right? It's ridiculous. It's completely ridiculous. But they've created, a lot of this comes from Foucault, by the way. They've created this whole system by thinking that it's institutions that generate reality, not that reality is itself generative and the creation of God.
The fat phobia thing strikes me because I don't know if you guys saw this, and thank you, Jack. There was a picture of Lizzo on a private plane. Oh,
I saw that one. Who couldn't? They say when you see a hippopotamus in nature, you better run. I booked it.
Elijah, thank you so much for coming by. I'm gonna let you go. You're working overtime. We're gonna bring Steve Kim on next, but man, I really appreciate it. You said so many powerful and smart things. We gotta have you back via Skype. You don't have to always be here in Nashville, but I just love smart people, and you know, the thing I've loved so far about this show is like everybody just naturally on this show, and I know you guys do it on your own platforms as well, but eventually everything reverts back to a biblical worldview. And you know, that discussion is not happening enough in America, that, because, you know, the Bible, and that was our foundation of truth that we built this country on, and they're just taking it away. And I see so many media outlets afraid to mention Jesus, afraid to mention God, afraid to mention the morality that comes from religious faith and Christianity. And man, you just fit right in. You're a fearless soldier. Keep on out there fighting for us.
You know, thank you. I just want to say one thing, though, to those that are struggling. We need to stop being afraid to talk about God and the truth just because we are undisciplined and having a difficult time following what he says. We don't stop talking about gravity, even if we, you know, are willing to take the risk. We always calculate the risks. And I'm going to say this as a man who struggles like every other man, and even the women who are watching, maybe you're with a man and you struggle yourself. I have been walking a lot further from the kingdom of God the last couple years than I should be. And a lot of times we feel ashamed because of the choices we're making. Even if it's not overt sin, it's just the lack of dedication to God. So we feel far away from the kingdom and we say, who am I to even speak about it? But it's about time that we start becoming bold to say what the truth is, because it sets us free, and those who are free indeed. And I'm working hard. It is a discipline through the power of the Holy Spirit to try to gain some of those spiritual disciplines to match up with the faith. It's not just through works, but the works of the evidence of the faith to try to come back to the kingdom of God. And so be fearless to anyone watching this, and realize that God is not ashamed of you, and don't be ashamed of God, and realize that there is reconciliation, there is forgiveness, and that every day is a new day. It is the gift of God. He does not hold yesterday against you, and he does not expect you to know tomorrow because you don't, but he gives you this gift, and today is the perfect day to restart fresh with Jesus Christ, to confess your sins, and to do your best to stay disciplined, and only today, because that's all that you've got.
You've hammered the main point of just everything that I believe in terms of, I talk constantly about, you know why I wear my Christianity on my sleeve now? Because I'm a sinner. And because, like, confessing, being a Christian, put some discipline and some restraint around me. I can't go into a strip club because I've told everybody I'm a Christian, and I'll look like a fool. So I don't go to strip clubs anymore, and I used to love strip clubs. And so it's the left and the enemies try to use our sin to silence us. And by being outspoken about our Christianity is the only way to combat our sins. And so this silence that they're forcing on you is forcing you to be more of a sinner. And so even if someone, and you know, I've struggled with my weight and gluttony, and I talk about it openly, but even if someone saw me at a McDonald's drive-thru, again, that doesn't erase the truth, what I've spoken about gluttony or about anything. It actually just, well, Jason got weak and went to McDonald's. And I haven't been to McDonald's since August 17th. So I've been without fast food for quite a long stretch.
Good for you, man.
Yeah. But it's because I talk about it and wear it on my sleeves. Thank you so much, man. You're awesome. Appreciate it. All right, stick around. The Korean Cosell, Steve Kim.
모두 다 빨리 박수 쳐 기다리지 말고 서둘러 Reason that I'm back is to feed you raps and I see that you are 배불러 So fly
All right, welcome back. Time to roll out to Los Angeles, the city of sin. We've been denigrating Los Angeles this entire show. Let's go out to the one sane person we know. Oh, there's actually two. Mario Lopez, I would consider him sane. Steve Kim, who works with Mario Lopez. Steve, welcome back to the show. You've heard me talking about Disney the last 2 days. Yesterday, I talked for an hour and 20 minutes straight. I was tired after that. But anyway, what are your thoughts on my evisceration of Disney and ESPN and their feminization of American culture?
Well, Jason, let's go back to Friday. And unfortunately, I had some technical issues. I wanted to get into this. In terms of Disney, with that female CEO, with that leaked video where she basically said, well, I have 3 or 2 transgender kids and one that's non-binary, this, and that, and I want to make sure that they're okay going into the future. That was a very, very strong, not so veiled message to everyone at that company. You better get on board here. This is what I believe. This is what I think, and you're not going to disagree. And it reminds me of that situation, Jason, and we've all been there, where your supervisor or your manager comes into the office and they said, hey, guys, my daughter is selling Girl Scout cookies. And immediately you're like, okay. I want 5 Thin Mints. In fact, you know what? Give me 10 Thin Mints. And you know what? Give me some Samoas. Because there's a pressure to get aboard. And I'm like, you know what? If you even have any Chips Ahoy, I'll take those too. So in other words, that was her way of saying, this is the party line, and you are going to step to it in lockstep. You're not going to disagree. You are not allowed to have another viewpoint. So think about this. If you are a high-paid employee or a guy that's making minimum wage, if you want to keep that job, she's telling you, you're going to believe this. Bottom line.
Well, you're actually hammering one of my main points, I think, yesterday in terms of I'm old enough, and Steve, you're old enough to remember the time when your political thoughts, your thoughts on sexuality, all of that was irrelevant in the workplace. No one cared. No one asked you. And now we've moved into this social media world where everybody posts all their most intimate personal thoughts over social media, and now you're evaluated on that. And there are actual jobs you cannot have. And what you're basically arguing is that executive at Disney is basically saying, you can't work here unless you agree with me on these transgender issues, LGBT issues, whatever. And it's like, that's an unhealthy work environment where in order to have a job, you must agree with the values of the corporation and the corporate leaders. And so there's like this thought litmus test that you have to pass to maintain a job in corporate America. And certainly if you want to rise in leadership, you better get on board with all of these thoughts, regardless of what your religion or your upbringing or what your thoughts are on your own accord. You have to get on board. And that's why I say about the people leading your human resources department are the actual gatekeepers and the actual most important people at the corporation. They control the culture and they install and impose the culture. And it's just really unhealthy and really unfair.
Yeah, it's incredibly Orwellian. They want a diversity of ethnicity and race. There's no doubt about that. They want something that's very cosmetic, but at the core of it, they do not want a diversity of philosophy or thought. That much is very, very simple. And I experienced it myself at the very end of my last years in the summer of George Floyd. And the bottom line is, you're going to have to support BLM. You were going to have to treat George Floyd as a hero. The NBA players that were boycotting were absolute heroes and social justice warriors that you had to praise. You could not even question how much impact were they really making with the hashtag and boycotting games inside the bubble. I experienced that up close and personal. Jason, I thought last night you eviscerated a couple of people. But I wanted to, the Chase Claypool thing, I think you hit on something that I've been talking about for the last 5-6 years on social media, is what I call competitive mourning. A person of note dies, and it's just not enough to say, man, I really like this guy, I was a fan of his, and I'm sorry to his family and his loved ones, rest in peace. Then it becomes, well, this guy was like my best friend, even though I never knew him. Then another guy, well, this guy was like my brother. Well, I'm going to worship this guy. And I'm like, well, wait a minute. I have a question for all these people, and I am not questioning the sincerity of Chase Claypool's emotions. However, Jay, can we be honest about this? And I don't know his family situation, but do people react like that and put up posts on Instagram or social media or TikTok when a mother or father or a grandfather or a grandmother die? They don't. Most of the times when that happens, I always hear something like, such and such was a great impact on me growing up. They raised me to be the person that I am, and I'm going to miss them. I love them. But they never actually put up all that other stuff. And I don't know. Maybe I'm just different because I just don't believe celebrity should be worshipped. The only death that had a real impact on me since my father passed away in 2016 actually happened March 13th, 2021. It was the sudden and unexpected passing of my favorite prize fighter growing up, Marvelous Marvin Hagler. Passed away unexpectedly. It was a shock, and it affected me. And I wrote a lot of posts kind of paying tribute to him as a fighter. But it never dawned on me that, you know what, I need to show some emotion here and post it all over social media. That would never happen.
The point you're making about Claypool is 1,000% accurate in terms of, look, maybe he and Dwayne Haskins over the past year became BFF. And there's a chance that is true. But I'm sure over the course of Chase's 23, 24, 25 years of life, he's had better friends than Dwayne Haskins. Has he, and maybe he's had people closer to him, coaches, people that helped him along the way that have passed away. Did he post videos of himself crying about it? Again, I think this was the ultimate clout chasing. I think that he was sad that Dwayne Haskins, a friend of his, had passed away tragically. I get it. But he wanted retweets and likes and wanted to build his Twitter and social media following more than he really legitimately wanted to honor Dwayne Haskins. And that's, I love your thought about competitive mourning and how the next thing you know, every NBA player was BFF with Kobe Bryant. That's a joke. Kobe didn't get along with a lot of people. Kobe was very aloof. Again, it would be like if you know, it's like Michael Jordan. He kept a tight little small circle. And everybody can't run around and pretend like they were Michael Jordan's best friend the way marginal. I mean, Matt Barnes, you know, nice NBA career, averaged 9 points a game or whatever, but you'd think he and Kobe were having cocktails and dinner 5 nights a week, or this whole little, I was close to Kobe and Kobe this, and worshiping Kobe, and it's... And look, the Kobe death. It was tragic. The guy was trying to take his daughter to a basketball game. It comes from out of nowhere. The day that it happened, I was sad and tearful on television. Someone young dying in service of their child. It's a sad thing. I get it, but this whole deal, like, you can't talk about Kobe in full, or somehow you're denigrating him or desecrating his memory. It's a joke to me, and it's all this competitive mourning because there's clout in it, there's followers in it, there's just points in terms of men are being baited into just pour your emotions out. That's what we want to see. That's what'll make America better. And I mean, the Claypool said, here's a moment of vulnerability, as if he were blessing us with the remains of Jesus Christ. The whole thing. I love your competitive mourning.
And Jason,
go ahead. You got go. I also eviscerated Joy Taylor. And
I want to get into that. I want to get into that. You got me thinking about this. She wore that hat. It's the first time everyone looked right above her neck, right? Okay, so the hat was interesting, and I wanted to make this point. I hate forced artificial diversity. I liked earned diversity. And as an Asian, I wasn't a good enough student to be affected by it. Did you know what they used to call UCLA out here in LA? They used to call it the University of Caucasians Lost Among Asians, because all the students will all be Asians. They all had like their 4.8s, 1590 SATs, and they barely make it. So I'm just thinking, all right, I get it. You want to have some diversity. You don't want this to look like the University of Beijing. But let me just tell you one thing. I'm actually going out to Miami this weekend to watch the Miami spring game. I'm going to be watching our team led by Mario Cristobal doing a great job. And I'm going to say one thing. If I ever see the University of Miami with 2 Asian cornerbacks, I would be like, oh, no. I don't want that diversity. I want to make this as plain as possible, because we are fearless here. I want to see the next Ryan McNeil. I want to see the next Philip Buchanan and Antrell Roll. I don't need to see my cousin. If I see any Han, Lees, or Choi's out there covering, I'm going to be like, this is why diversity doesn't work. And in fact, the only Asians I ever want to see on a Miami football team better be the kicker, maybe the punter, or the guys there to lift the GPA, the team GPA. We know our roles. But generally, this is what you want at Ball State, the best 22 guys. So when she says diversity is great and we trust it, I don't trust it at all. Not the way it's being implemented currently. There's nothing to trust.
Anything else that you needed to cover?
Yeah, one last thing about the NBA. I love what you said about guys playing 82 games. This is a cultural thing, though, and there's 3 people I blame. Silver, Popovich, and LeBron. I remember growing up, the 80s Lakers, late 80s, they're making a championship run. They had a last game, the 82nd game in Portland. So Pat Riley rests all the starters. You know what the reaction was of David Stern? Of a meaningless game. He fined the Lakers and says, we're not doing that. And I love the fact that John Stockton told you about a month ago, my job is to play basketball. I signed up for this. It's a game I love. It's a duty to play 82 games. And if you ever look at the 80s NBA championship highlight films, I've watched all of them. It's amazing back then that when they used to travel from Boston to LA, these guys used to fly in commercial, not even all first class. And yet you're talking about, load management. Get out, you guys. You are not in a coal mine. You're not working in a factory. You get to play a game for millions of dollars. Okay? This is the smallest violin in the world. I don't feel a single amount of sympathy for them, and the NBA has a problem. If the guys and the league do not care about the 82-game regular season, neither will we.
Thank you, Steve. All right, I'm going to get to my cleanup hitter. Shemeka Michelle. Next.
We must exist in a state of man glorious, as we are protected by the red, the white, and the blue. But remember, the mind is the key. The fearless soldier pledges to place God first and foremost in his everyday endeavors of life. We, the fearless army, are one nation under God, indivisible, with freedom and a belief in the American dream. The men bold enough to join our movement comprise what we like to call the New Dream Team. We are leaders of our families, our churches, and of this nation. We reject the seeds of division that are planted by corporate media misinformation. We affirm that all men are created equal and are endowed with inalienable rights, which are granted by our Heavenly Father. We are bound by honor to accept God's challenge, to take the flag and lead, to cherish, to protect, and to nurture the life of our unborn seed. I am a fearless soldier, so shed no tears for me. I am not a victim. I am the man that God made me to be. Amen.
Disney is feminizing America and American culture. And you can't feminize American culture, without feminizing the sports world. And making, again, everything about feelings and about how, quite frankly, women, it's a female worldview. It's a female-driven society. And Disney is the leader in imposing, in undermining masculinity and a male-driven worldview, and imposing a female, emasculated American culture. All right, welcome back. That was me yesterday, and I believe we played that clip because that's what Shemeka wants to react to. That's what stuck out to her. Shemeka Michelle, welcome back to the show. And your thoughts, or what did you take from my Disney conversation?
First of all, let me say the entire conversation was just one big blaze. I enjoyed it. But that actually stuck out to me when you talked about how we are feminizing the culture. And you talked about undermining masculinity, which means to undermine means to erode the base or foundation. And it just made me start to think about how the lines have been so blurred between masculinity and femininity and traditional roles and traditional values. And I do believe that Disney has done this on purpose. Of course, they've always sold us a dream. Their whole motto, their song, "When you wish upon a star, makes no difference who you are. Anything your heart desires can come to you." And so now they are pushing that these kids can actually be anything they want to be, which includes a different gender. And they talked about how last year they started saying magic has no gender. So I do believe that Disney's push has been intentional. But also you talked about how they had to come through sports. And I think it was right on time when Cam Newton came out with his video. And while I agree with what he was saying, my initial reaction was just, because it wasn't the message, but the messenger brought me right back to what you were saying about how we have feminized culture, and they went through sports and now they are undermining masculinity. Because I just felt like, what a crazy person to be saying this, because Cam actually has said out of his own mouth that he is a masculine man. I don't think we look at any of the pictures of him in his clothing and think, ooh, masculinity. This is the epitome of a manly man. Cam has said out of his own mouth that he loves everything Russell Westbrook does, from his fashion to his passion for the game. Cam has said out of his own mouth that he likes to be chased by women. This brought me back to the Bible. Being chased is a feminine attribute. Women should be chaste. The scripture says that so shall a man leave his mother and father and cleave to his wife. A lot of the translations have put the word join in there, but cleave is actually, the Hebrew word means to chase, means to pursue closely, means to snatch, captivate by pursuing. So that's a feminine attribute. And I just think that we have been so feminized, as you said, that we don't even know our roles. We don't even know as women when we are being masculine, and men don't know when they're being feminine. And he talked about how women need to cook and know when to shut up. I agree with that, but I just think it goes so much deeper, because we don't even understand our masculine and feminine frames anymore. And it's been happening for a very long time, so much so that we put those attributes as, oh, if you cook, you're feminine, and that's not necessarily true. If you provide, you're masculine, that's not necessarily true. We are such a feminized culture that we don't even know anymore, Jason. We are just all confused. The waters are muddy.
I want to add a little context to your Cam Newton comments for people that may not be aware, but Cam on a podcast on Sunday, I believe, on the $1 Million Worth of Game podcast, he was talking about his family, his upbringing, his parents' long marriage, 37, 38 years old, saying that his dad represented the epitome of manhood for him, had the perfect role model. And then he went on to talk about women and what he likes in women and his philosophy on women. And he said, quote, and I'm going to include the profanity just to get him in context, "It's a lot of women who are bad bitches," and I say bitches in a way not to degrade a woman, but just to go off the aesthetic of what they deem as a boss chick. "A woman for me is handling your own, but knowing how to cater to man's needs. I think a lot of times when you get the aesthetic of like, I'm a boss bitch, I'm a this, I'm a that, no baby, but you can't cook. You don't know when to be quiet. You don't know how to allow a man to lead." My problem with it, all of it, is Cam's lack of self-awareness. He wants a woman to allow him to lead. And my thing is, hey man, how can you be a leader when you fathered a child, for a woman with 4 different children who you refused to marry? You broke up, you ended that relationship because you got an Instagram model pregnant and had a 5th child. So you've undermined your ability to be a leader, and he needs to have enough self-awareness to understand that. When you have 5 illegitimate kids, it's going to be real hard for a woman to say, I'm going to jump behind and follow this man. He had 4 kids with Kim Proctor and wouldn't marry her. What would make me think this man would marry me? And so Cam Newton has always suffered from a lack of self-awareness and a lack of being able to evaluate himself and improve himself and to look any problem to look first in the mirror. And so he's talking about women as if they're the problem when he may need to look in the mirror and say his lack of obedience to God is what undermines his ability to be a leader of women. There's a cycle, and again, I'm saying this because Cam was raised in the church, espouses Christian values, allegedly. His father was a deacon and a minister in the church. He says his parents represent Christianity for him. He hasn't followed the blueprint of his own father, let alone God. How can he expect a woman to hop on board and follow his lead? He's not exhibiting the qualities of a leader.
Well, according to Cam, because he has money and because he is Cam Newton, he can actually get away with some of these things and women will still want him, even though he has all of these illegitimate children and all of this, as he calls it, baggage. So he doesn't even really seem to hold to those principles and values that he desires himself. If you have all of these godly principles and desires, we need to see you as a man exhibit those. Like, we need to see that, but he feels like he's somehow above that and that he doesn't have to be held to those standards.
Well, and the same problems impact him on the field in terms of that money deludes him, just like talent deluded him. And there's all these little things about playing a quarterback that he didn't have to do because he had all this talent. That's the same thing that money has done to him. He doesn't have to do all these little things. And again, it sounds like I'm just beating up on Cam, but I've been through this mentality. Money has made a fool out of me and made me think I could cut corners. Can't be done. Not if you want to be a leader. Not if you want a woman to follow you and wants her to cater to your needs. Are you catering to what she needs? Monogamy, matrimony. Those are things she wants. Are you willing to cater to those things? She wants you to be the leader of her spiritual salvation. Are you capable of doing that with 5 illegitimate kids? Tomorrow, Shemeka, I've run out of time. That's tomorrow plan, telling me that I gotta go. We're gonna pick, we may do some more on Cam tomorrow. I may have you back, and me, you, and Uncle Jimmy will talk about Cam tomorrow. I'll see you tomorrow.
Looking like it's my time, feeling all kinds of free. These words are our religion, all regrets and our decisions. We all wanna go to heaven with freedom. It's my obligation, no hate, discrimination. Raising up your hands for freedom. Raise up your hands.